WCNC Charlotte. This is Flashpoint, where power and politics collide, and the tough questions get asked and answered.
Hey everybody, welcome to Flashpoint here inside the WCNC Charlotte app. I'm Ben Thompson, joined by Julie Kay. Today we are talking about, I don't even know the best way to say it, the I-77 toll lanes. I think the scientific term for this is hot mess.
Right.
City Council voting this past week in what by most appears to be a surprise vote that they were not expecting to take, and voting to basically pull out of their agreement for the toll lanes.
I was at that meeting.
Yeah.
It was such a big agenda. We previewed it last week with Walker while you were on vacation, and he and I split up with what we'd focus on. And I made the mistake of choosing data centers. I should have picked I-77. We had no idea it was going to be that just astonishing.
That was not the plan, as we're about to hear. And listen, no matter how you feel about the toll lanes, they're very unpopular, and honestly, for good reason in a lot of neighborhoods. Still, I think there's some argument to be made that the situation the city finds itself in right now is really uncharted water about how to move forward.
Politically, legally, we're talking about multiple governing bodies here that now have to confer with what their different rules are about what happens now.
That's right.
And of course, in the middle of all this is Councilmember Ed Driggs.
Yep, so
he really is in the middle of
He's in the middle of it because he's the transportation chair on the city council committee. And then also he's the city's member in the CRTPO, which is the local transit authority planning organization. So he's sort of the guy at the middle of all of this right now.
Yeah.
So we sat down and chatted with him about what's happened so far and what's about to happen going into the future. Take a listen. All right, joining us now is City Councilman Ed Driggs. Councilman, thanks for coming on. Good to see you.
Good morning. Good to be here.
All right, so you're sort of the man at the center of all of this as it's unfolded. Give us an idea of what's the state of play as it stands right now.
What's going on?
What's going on and what's next?
So let's be clear about what happened, all right? There were two council votes. The first one was in favor of a resolution that was clearly intended for us to continue engaging with NCDOT, representing our constituents, advocating. And the second one that came along, in spite of what Councilmember Johnson said, directly contradicted the first one, because by rescinding the authority that the council had given and thereby setting in motion a rescission by the CRTPO, we were basically calling the whole thing off permanently. And there was no such thing as unrescind. I think there were people who believed that we could unrescind and therefore thought it was okay to take this action. And you could tell from the expressions on the faces of people around the dais that when that second motion to rescind carried, they were surprised. It was a mistake. And basically too many people thought that they could vote no and thereby stay in good standing with the activists and not do any harm. And so now we have the situation we have, and essentially there is a lot of activity involving the other members of CRTPO, involving the legislature and state leaders in Raleigh to try and figure out how to extricate ourselves from this situation.
So how do we extricate ourselves from this situation?
What needs to happen is council needs to learn about all of the implications of that vote that we took, understand that it's not, as was represented on the night, a minor change from the prior action, and with the fullness of all of that knowledge, somebody among the six has got to be willing to say, okay, I will now support a motion to reverse the action that we took.
Has that happened yet?
Conversations are ongoing.
Okay.
Is that what was going on yesterday with the special meeting being called off? The internal discussions?
The special meeting was called off because it was apparent that there would be, for one, a big demonstration in the chamber, and the situation among council members was unsettled, and therefore it didn't look like there was a whole lot of upside from having that meeting, and it was decided not to go ahead with it. The meeting was scheduled before Monday night, and before either the vote on the resolution or the vote on rescinding had been taken, with the idea that we would have an open-ended opportunity to talk this over. It came out of the committee meeting when we ran out of time, and it was clear that we just needed more time. And so we said, okay, let's get together on the 14th and let's talk this over for as long as we need to. And then you had those votes on Monday night, and that changed things. And after those votes had been taken, when the word went out that there would still be a meeting on the 14th, the opponents got very vocal and said, hey, you've decided on this, because they knew that the only thing that could happen at that meeting would be to reverse the second decision, and they wanted to hang on to that victory.
I've got about 1 million questions that are coming to mind, but let me make sure I understand this correctly. So there are currently ongoing discussions contemplating the idea of rescinding the rescission.
I think some of us are hopeful that we can do that, because for the rescinding motion to stand and for the CRTPO then to vote is a terrible outcome. I mean, you lose $3.5 billion worth of investment, you lose 18 new bridges going from east to west across I-77, you lose all the benefits, and at the same time, you incur the wrath of state government, and that has implications too for Powell bill funding and for other money that could be available for many other projects within the entire CRTPO area.
Because there's a lot of nuance here, and there's a lot of things you don't have to like about the I-77 toll lanes without throwing out the baby with the bathwater, and that's basically what council voted to do. At the same time, DOT was meeting with people in the community, tweaking the plan. The plan is different than it was several months ago. Clearly still not where a lot of people want it to be, but this went from tweaking and changing and updating and getting better outcomes to completely getting rid of it. And
if you take away the authority for the P3 structure, you take away the money. And with no money, NCDOT has made it clear there's no reason for us to work on this, because there is no prospect of being able to pay for it. And in fact, that's what they told us in 2024 at CRTPO when they asked us to consider authorizing the P3 structure. They said, you can choose. Either we have a public-private partnership, or we try to state fund this thing, which will never happen. And so we thought, okay, this could work, that doesn't work, let's do this. And the situation is the same now. Why would they go ahead with something when there is absolutely no prospect of state funding for the road? And in fact, you lose ground, because the $600 million of state funding that is currently available for the road would get reallocated to other projects.
I was on with Mike Collins earlier over on WFAE, and he brought up the point, and I think it's a fair point, and I've read this in the past, but why couldn't there be state funding for something like this? The state's just not in the business of building roads at this scale anymore. What's the reason? Why is the private partnership so important?
So you go all the way back to 2007, the Fast Lane study, and at that time, several communities, including Charlotte, investigated the issue of the prospective need for major road projects. They decided then that managed lanes would be the answer, because it created a new revenue source. Those could be public projects like 485 South, which was paid for by the state government and on which the tolls are much lower, by the way, at least so far, or in this case, public-private partnership, because the state didn't have the budget. The cost of this project has been spiraling ever since it was first put on the books in 2014. And you got to a situation where constraints like the corridor cap, which is the maximum amount of money that the state can allocate to one project in a planning cycle, would be greatly exceeded. And you would soak up all of the state funding capacity for several planning cycles, for 10 years, just paying for this. And even then, whether or not that availability of the money in tranches would work. So that it was clear, NCDOC said it will not get done with state funding. Now, there could be a debate about whether or not the state should simply find new revenue sources aside from the gas tax in order, like, it would have to be a different tax. It might be general fund money. And there has been a discussion at the legislature about the fact that the gas tax has been declining because of more efficient cars and things. And what are the possibilities for replacing that lost revenue, not limiting ourselves to those gas tax proceeds for the highway fund. But they haven't been able to work anything out. And everything that comes up as a possibility is very unpopular with somebody.
So the next thing that happens is that there's a Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization meeting, I believe this upcoming Wednesday. this issue is currently not on the agenda, I believe, because they were not expecting it to be on the agenda before the vote
Correct.
happened. Do you anticipate that will change? What are you anticipating is going to happen? Because the next step in this, correct me if I'm wrong, is that they would end up voting, and then that would end up officially killing the plan.
Right, the CRTPO has
Right,
the
yeah.
end-all be-all say,
If the
correct?
CRTPO were to rescind, then under federal law, you have uncertainty about whether the project could proceed because federal law requires that the MPO, which is what the CRTPO is, the
Yeah.
Municipal Planning Organization, support the project originally in 2014, and then the P3 funding option, which was approved in 2024. If that's rescinded, then the money goes away, and the status of the project is that it stays on the schedule initially, but at the next step in the planning cycle, it would be taken off and the money would be reallocated. So the CRTPO meeting next week does not have this item on the agenda, and we are studying the rules as to what can be acted on if it isn't on the agenda. And bodies like the City Council and the CRTPO Board have different provisions about what it takes to do that. In the case of the CRTPO, it's 2/3 of the membership would have to agree to take an action that wasn't on the agenda. So then you study the vote that occurred in 2024, where some people were already opposed to this for reasons different from the ones that are now driving the debate. And in my opinion, we don't get to 2/3 who would be wanting to take action. So even if Charlotte or possibly the county, because the county has not been on board the whole time, tried to start that action, I believe it would fall short of the needed votes. So I think we're trying to work on a timeline that contemplates an action by CRTPO, if any, in June.
I think what's so interesting about just this whole situation and the conversation we're having now is a lot of this feels like untreaded water. Having to go and look at all the bylaws and the rules for, I mean, this is, I imagine, an unexpected position that you're in right now.
So we knew earlier when we were discussing the legalities of all of this, you know, could the CRTPO rescind and so on. One thing that was clear from my conversations with the CRTPO attorney, the city attorney, and other lawyers I know, you are in totally uncharted water. So there is no statute or precedent for the situation where this consent was given by the CRTPO with a commitment not to interfere any further and then rescinds it. Do you have a basis for legal action, for example? The President Pro Tem Berger has said that they are going to be looking hard at all the money that has been spent on this project to date, $60 million or so, and they're going to want to get it back. So that poses an interesting challenge for either the membership of the CRTPO or Charlotte, not exactly clear. Would it be a court action? Would it be a state legislative action? The ways in which this could move forward are hard to predict, but the city attorney agreed with me when I was talking to her that we do not have a clear-cut reference that would resolve how this plays out.
But you're saying there's a situation where if this were to happen, the city or one of these boards could be owing millions of dollars.
I believe on the basis of what Senator Berger said, there will be an attempt to recover the money that was spent on this, particularly because they spent money in every planning cycle from 2014 up, which was the so-called P3, the third stage, to P8, where we are now. And each time they updated the state's funding plan for road projects, this thing was reevaluated and resubmitted, and work was done. So there's a history of investment by NCDOT in the I-77 project, and they're going to look back at all the money that was spent on this thing, and in light of the fact that the CRTPO had given its consent and then rescinded on a promise not to interfere, they're going to argue that they're entitled to get that money back.
Because I think it's important for folks to understand at home that while some representatives on council or on the transportation planning organization say they're speaking on behalf of their constituents and the people who are concerned, that's well and good, but your point, and I think the point others were making, is that these bodies already signed off on this. Like the time for debate on all of this should have technically already happened. Am I correct in sort of assuming
So
that?
Ben, that's exactly the difficulty, right? We went through this whole process at the CRTPO, and I was the Charlotte representative. I participated in a working group to define what the conditions would be that we had for a P3, given all the controversy around I-77 North and so on, and we addressed all the issues. We studied the thing carefully. And then I went back to my colleagues on council, and I told them there is a vote pending, and these are the circumstances. I wrote memos. They voted unanimously to instruct me to go back and support the P3. And then from the time of that vote, NCDOT started to work on the so-called RFQ, Request for Qualifications. And CRTPO was still involved, engaged with them on the preparation of that, defining what our requirements were. And we reached a point in time where a draft of the RFQ had been circulated, a 60-day review period for CRTPO had passed, and no one on CRTPO called for a vote to modify what they had done. And thereby, the promise not to interfere became effective. After that 60-day period, our commitment not to involve ourselves, the CRTPO's commitment not to involve ourselves any further became effective. Subsequent to that, NCDOT, in the course of its normal process, as required by the federal government, circulated maps to the communities nearby, and then the protests from the communities erupted. And what really inflamed the whole situation was that particularly McCrory Heights is an historically black neighborhood. And the creation of I-77 originally cut right through it without any regard for the people there. It's part of the dark history of our country that no one cared about them. And so the emotion around that and the emotion around race in general energized this protest to what we have now. And the Black Political Caucus and Sustain Charlotte have taken advantage of that. What troubles me is that a lot of the opposition has been based on really bad information about what's going on and trying to explain to people, look at these benefits, look at how this can work, look at the park you could get, look at the bridges. It's almost like no one cares. Right now, they want to win a fight, and that's what they care about. And
but in your view, though, did the DOT misstep in that the plan has been updated several times and I think improved upon by a lot of standards? Should they have waited to put out a plan that was going to be more palatable to more people? Because I think the current plan now doesn't involve any homes in McCrory Heights. Why not come out with that from the very beginning?
So when we discussed it at CRTPO, they said, here's the situation on I-77, and these are our reasons for wanting to do this, right? High mortality rate in accidents, the pollution, and so on. And that was what that discussion was about. And so we considered a lot of things, but not the social issue. It just didn't come up. And that's the thing that really, my colleagues would not have voted for this if there had been any indication of the kind of controversy that we're experiencing now. And in fact, I would have suggested that we delay the CRTPO vote until we had solved this. So in that sense, it was a bit of an ambush. I felt that since 2014, there has been on the books publicly and then renewed every couple of years this plan to widen I-77 and to create toll lanes. Where was everybody? And somehow, after we had gotten in as far as we did, this action started. So, of course, we were caught off guard. CRTPO was, and the council was. They don't want to talk about the fact that it was unanimous in 24 that we should go ahead with this. Yeah. But that was done because there was no indication yet of the controversy we're experiencing now.
And then jump ahead to this past Monday.
Yeah.
And I think it's been a minute since I've actually attended a city council meeting, but I attended many in my day. And not to say that there aren't surprises, because there can be surprises, but for folks at home, you all often go into these things with at least a common understanding of how things will play out, or how your colleagues feel, or what you're going to be voting on. The actual votes don't happen, of course, till they're in the chambers, but you all have some indication of how things are going to happen. Then this came up, and it was, and I mean, I've seen this happen in the past, once or twice before, but you end up, as a council, taking a vote you were not anticipating taking. And then everybody is on the spot. And we've got to say this, given the mayor's announcement last week, puts an additional spotlight on a few people who are perhaps wanting that job. And you have sort of a perfect storm for some poor decision making, I feel like.
So there was a consensus going into the meeting, and you saw the first vote. The consensus was that we would pass this resolution in lieu of rescinding, and that we would thereby avoid the direct confrontation with NCDOT while making a powerful statement about our values and in support of constituents. And it was 10-1. So we thought we were all done. And then Councilmember Johnson made her motion, and now you had a situation where a number of my colleagues who had made commitments to the Black Political Caucus that they would support a motion to rescind were in a bind, right? And that's something we were hoping to avoid, but particularly because it was described as something that was actually quite similar to what we had already done, and so on. And I think based on the belief of some of my colleagues that we could take the rescind action and that would give us time to work on this thing and get to a better outcome rather than kill it completely. And as I said before, I think a couple of my colleagues maybe thought that they could, I mean, I think Councilmember Watlington said, well, it's not going to pass, but because it was apparent to most of us that the second motion contradicted the first one, and therefore no one thought it would pass. And I really believe it was an accident. It was a mistake that that second one passed. That was going to be an opportunity for a minority of the council to demonstrate solidarity with the protesters and not do too much harm. And no one thought carefully about what if it really passes. And you could see the faces around the dais. It's like, oh, wow, you know.
At that point, remind me of council rules. Could the mayor have stepped in? She does have the possibility to veto certain measures. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, she does, in which case it takes 7 votes. And I think the suddenness of all of this meant that it's like we were shocked, right? So, and the city attorney didn't suggest that, or I don't know why it didn't come up, but I think we were all just kind of stunned at what had just happened. And of course, I appreciated the implications right away, so I was completely flabbergasted.
I mean, is there any conversations with NCDOT since then? Have there been any communications at all?
There's a lot of communication going on among NCDOT, state leaders, members of the council. The lines are humming right now, so I don't know what shape it could take, but certainly there is an effort underway to save us from the implications, the ultimate implications of this decision.
Wow. If you didn't follow politics before this, then now's a good time to start. Because, goodness, I think, you know, I think for the people watching this, they need to know there's whether you like the toll lanes or not, it's only a good thing to have continued conversation about it. And for the use of taxpayer money and good governance to all of a sudden stop it altogether, I feel like a lot of people feel like, wow, maybe there's more conversation to be had. As you say, this stops some of that conversation. So I just hope that the conversation will continue and that this has not completely stopped it.
So, Ben, I just have to say we need to get through the current crisis in order to be able to explore other possibilities. If we don't solve the immediate problem, there will be no money and there won't be anything to talk about, and that very bad situation on I-77 will get worse. You did mention, by the way, the mayoral races. You're right, it's very complicated right now because there are probably 5 hopefuls on the council. Yeah. We have the issue of the interim appointment, and then we have the outlook for next year and the election. And I'm sure that puts my colleagues in a very difficult position. In particular, Councilmember Graham, who spoke pretty emphatically in favor of the first vote on Monday night, and then joined the people who voted for rescinding. And those were contradictory positions, but it's a reflection of the pressure he's under.
Given the situation with the, a long-term interim that has to be found here, are you hopeful that that's someone from outside of council, given the pressure people are under right now?
It's hard to say. You've heard all kinds of talk. My personal position on that has been that I would like to see a clear majority of my Democrat colleagues and not be in a position where they're looking at me, to break a tie or something. Well, I was in a situation like that in the past when we had one of these appointments, and I just said, guys, don't come to me. I'm not going to announce in favor of anybody. You need to get yourselves organized so that you have a majority of the majority party, because even though I would like it in a way for a single member of the minority party to end up being the one that makes this determination, is probably not how it should work.
Yeah. Wow. Got your work cut out for you. Really
It's been busy.
I can only imagine. All right, Ed Driggs, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it, and keep us posted, okay?
Good talking to you. Thank you.
All right, more Flashpoint after this.
All right, welcome back. Of course, the other big news since you and I have last talked, Ben, is Mayor Vilal's resignation. Also another big surprise. We talked about it a little bit in that interview with Ed Driggs about, how that's kind of playing a role in maybe some decisions that we're seeing on council, but they have to fill this interim role of, a year and a half left, and then
as you know, there's a number of people on council who are interested in the job. Yeah. Not necessarily the interim job, but the full-time job running for it. So that dynamic affects everything. And as that jockeying happens, a lot of community groups are very interested and very invested in seeing what comes next in the interim. And that includes the NAACP, the local chapter. Corinne Mack, longtime head of that organization, came under a bit of fire this week for a statement that she made. We interviewed her earlier the week, Lisa Washington, my morning co-anchor, and I, about a post she made talking about that person, that interim, who it might be, and the qualifications she thinks are necessary. So take a look at this interview with us and Corinne Mack.
Many people are reacting to a controversial statement from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg branch of the NAACP. You see it here, the organization posting on Facebook advocating the interim Charlotte mayor be black because current mayor Vilal's is black. Opposing comments say that position should be filled by the most qualified person.
We are joined by Corinne Mack. She's the president of the NAACP here locally to talk about their stance. Corinne, thanks for coming on. We do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me this morning.
So,
good morning.
Are you surprised? This is now actually getting some national attention this morning online. Are you surprised by the reaction?
I'm not surprised. Let me first say that the statement is my personal statement. It's not the NAACP branch statement. It's my statement as the president of the branch. And I'm not surprised looking at the climate in this country right now.
So the mayor has announced that she is stepping down at the end of the month. We know the majority of the council members, obviously the mayor of African-American descent. Tell us why you think the next person, the interim person, should be, are you saying a black woman or just a black person?
I said a black person, and the reason I said it is because all over the country, black representation is being stripped. We have two specific lawsuits that we're all looking at, both in Louisiana as well as in Alabama. We also know that in South Carolina just this week, in District 6, which is Congressman Clyburn's district, there was a move to try to strip him from an opportunity to hold his seat. And so because of that, my position is it would not be a good look for us to give a seat that originally was a black woman's seat that we elected, duly elected in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area, to a white person at this time. We know that we had several instances where we, the city council elected a white person as the interim mayor, Patsy Kenzie, as well as Dan Klopfelter. I had no problem with that. I was the president at that time. I had no problem with it. But we're in a very specific time right now in this country, at a time where black representation is being stripped every single day throughout the country. I do not believe that we should be giving this particular seat at this time to a white person.
So this is going to be an interim position. Earlier this week, we had the former mayor, Jennifer Roberts, on. She was saying she thought that she would be a good person to serve in the interim position because she wouldn't take a salary. She's not interested in running in 2027, and then she has the experience of being mayor before. Are you concerned that, you know, someone like that being just in the interim position may want to run? Is that kind of the concern?
No, there's no concern at all about any particular individual. This was not about Jennifer Roberts or any particular person. I'm simply saying because of the climate we're in, let's do what is correct, which is ensure that we put a Black person in that particular seat. There are many qualified Black people. I'm disturbed that there's a question about whether or not a Black person is qualified. There are many Black qualified people in the city of Charlotte. Let's look for one. I'm talking to the city council, and choose one of those individuals. It's an interim seat. Any person who wants to run in November of 2027 has the right to do so.
But you alluded to the fact that you wrote this, but this is posted as the organization. And the post not only makes the case for the importance of Black representation, which I think is not a controversial ideal at all,
right,
but it goes on to talk about white folks lobbying for the job are disturbing, tone-deaf, and self-centered. Is that the stance of the NAACP?
That's the stance of Corinne Mack. I wrote the post. And the reason I said it was back to what I said earlier. Because of the climate we're in right now, I don't see any of those very same people who are lobbying to be the mayor here in the city of Charlotte saying anything about the racism that we're enduring as Black people. Not one of them. I don't see any of them outraged about the fact that Black representation is being stripped all over this country. Not one of them. And so it's interesting to me that you want to lobby to get a seat that a Black person is leaving, but not once have you said anything about the Black representation being stripped from us all over this country.
So, Corinne, will you or will the board nominate a person or suggest a person to the council who you think should fill this position in the interim?
No, we do not endorse. That's why I said this was not about any in particular person, you know, whether it's Jennifer Roberts or any other white person who may be asking for the seat. I am talking about in general, the importance for us to replace a seat that was originally a Black woman for a Black person. Right. And a qualified Black person. And there are many.
All right. Corinne Mack, head of the local NAACP. Corinne, thanks for coming on. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a blessed day.
You as well. That our interview with Corinne Mack from last week after that sort of controversy over the Facebook post. Yeah. I think it was interesting because she tried to make the distinction that it was her statement, but
it was from the account.
It was from, and you know, we've seen people get into trouble like this with all sorts of organizations. You and I have to be mindful about yes. those sorts of things. Like yeah. we can't post on the WCNC account personal opinions. That just can't happen. So
just sometimes I would love to.
Right? You cannot. Our bosses would not let us, and frankly, I don't want to. But I think that was where some of the confusion right. came from. Was she speaking as an organization or on her own behalf?
Yeah, interesting to get to see that interview, especially just with so much conversation
yeah.
going around about. I mean, you mentioned the jockeying that's happening, but I mean, this is a year and a half we're looking at. It's interim, but it's going to be almost a full term that whoever fills it. And
it's as we sort of explained with that interview with Ed Driggs earlier, it's a critical time. I mean, there's a lot going on, and I think this I-77 issue, I think people feel so strongly about it in so many ways, and for good reason, but. We want to make sure that our leaders are making the decisions they intentionally want to make for the city, and it's hard to know if that's what's happening right now, right. or
not anchored by other motives.
Yeah, not anchored by other motives, whether there's personal motives or other people, and I think it's we all want what's best for the city and for who am I to say what's the right direction, whether it's toll lanes or not toll lanes.
And that's why I don't want that job.
Exactly. That's why I do not want that job. No. But we certainly want the conversations among our city leaders to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on that note, though, we had quite the lengthy conversation with Councilmember Driggs For me, I think what was most interesting was just some of the process that's ahead of us. What did you take out of that interview?
It's, I mean, he says it's uncharted territory for us. I'm not a big fan of hearing a city leader say that.
I'm a little scared.
That doesn't make me feel very good. You know, you always want cooler heads to prevail and want nuanced, serious conversation to happen. And I think what he described is may not be what's happened. You know, he's also, you know, the lone Republican. So you know, it's important to keep that in mind.
Pressure in that seat, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
and he does not speak for all of council by any means whatsoever. That's important to say. But he is sort of the man at the center of it right now, which is why we wanted to do that interview. And I wish I could say as a citizen, I feel good about where things are going. I'm not sure yet.
I mean, I feel different about it every day.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah.
And I think that that's going to continue to be the case for the coming weeks.
That's right.
He mentioned that June meeting might be where something takes place. I think it will be interesting over the coming days and weeks to see if we hear more from some of those other members of the CRTPO.
That's right.
Some of those town representatives. I got a chance to speak with Commission Chairman Mark Durrell yesterday.
Mhm.
County's always been against it.
Yep.
He doubled down. They'll be in lockstep and is supporting an independent study of other alternatives, but I think...
And I feel like you can't, far be it for me to say either one, but I don't feel like you can't hate on that because they've been consistent.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's been the case.
You know,
This whole time.
it's you know, the sort of unpredictable changing of minds and things like that make it difficult for organizations, government and otherwise to function.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this is very much a moving target and a fluid situation. And
Yeah.
even on council, it doesn't seem like this is a completely settled issue.
No.
Based on what Ed Driggs is saying.
No, absolutely not. And that was a very late cancel for that meeting yesterday. That was my assignment in the morning, and then I had to change
Yeah.
course pretty quickly. So,
All right. Well, we'll cover it all right here on WCNC inside the app and on air on WCNC Charlotte as well. So we'll see you next week for another edition of Flashpoint.